Let's start.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm Professor Arnab Mukherjee with the Center for Public Policy, and I have with me Professor Shankarshan Basu from the finance area. It's an absolute privilege to sort of welcome you to this webinar on reconnecting and rebounding. This is a webinar focused on migrant workers, their employment, and how the economy sort of comes back. This is organized jointly by IIM Bangalore, Skill India, and the National Skills Network. And we are joined by a august group of speakers who have very pertinent and parallel exposure to sort of give reflections on this particular concern. Let me sort of begin by starting off the presentation. Hatem, if you could start off the presentation. Yeah. So, so if you look at India today and you do a quick snapshot of employment in India, then what we see is these two parallel pictures. On the left panel, you see the CMIE data on the rapid decline in employment that has happened. Between April 19 to March 2020, the number of employees in India have been about 400 million. Starting April 20, which is the first full month of lockdown, we see that this has crashed to about 270 million. We see a little pickup in May, but there's a very large group of people who now are unemployed. With this unemployment has come a rapid movement of individuals from urban centers and centers of growth in the country to sort of move all the way back to their homes. And so what we've done is we have looked at the district of Chittoor, which is a largely agricultural sort of district in Andhra Pradesh. And we have simply looked at the government data, which is capturing household requests for work under the Employment Guarantee Scheme of India. And what you can clearly see is that starting from April onwards, the demand for work in this one district alone, we have obviously more than 600 districts in the country, has gone from about 1.5 lakh, 2.5 lakhs, all the way to 4.5 lakhs. So there is a huge movement in terms of people from urban employed formal structures to rural settings in which people are looking for work. So this is the overwhelming national challenge that the country faces today. Labor markets are at the heart of this, and this webinar focuses on how we can try to ensure that large parts of India that is unemployed today finds employment quickly and rapidly. To address this question, we will be looking at various perspectives that are coming in from across the country. We are very privileged to sort of have a very august panel of speakers. We will be starting off after I finish with Manish Mishra, who is the lead consultant of Sankalp. Sankalp stands for Skills Acquisition and Knowledge Awareness for Livelihood Promotion with the Ministry of Skill Development. And he will be talking about the initiatives there. He will be followed by Professor Amit Basole, who is with the Azim Premji University and is leading the Center for Sustainable Employment at APU and is the lead author for the State of Working India. They've been doing some interesting surveys and we'll bring in some perspectives from there. He will be followed by Mr. D. Balamurugan, who's in Patna, Bihar. He's the CEO and State Mission Director for Jivika, which is looking at addressing poverty alleviation as a part of the Bihar Rural Livelihood Promotion Society, and has significant exposure working with self-help groups and how economic activity can be fostered in Bihar, giving a very robust picture of what can happen on the rural side. He will be followed by Mr. Supreet Singh Gulati from Gujarat. The choice of these two states reflects the fact that Gujarat is a state which was employing a lot of people, and they have lost a lot of individuals who contribute to economic activity in Gujarat. And they have moved back home. So UP and Bihar are the states where we see a lot of uptake. Mr. Sukrit Singh Gulati is the mission director of the Gujarat Skill Development Mission, and he will be sort of looking at his experience of not only helping individuals move from Gujarat to their homes, but also about how to kickstart these activities. Subsequent to this, we will have Mr. Sanjay Awasthi, who heads the Office of the International Organization for Migration. This is an organization which has been looking at migration-related issues across the world. And given India's challenge today, he'll be addressing some of the ways in which we can think about addressing India's challenges. Professor Shankarshan Basu will be closing on the meeting, but before he does, we'll take a few questions.
We'll take a few questions
from everyone. I'd like to sort of just lay down a couple of ground rules so that we can sort of do this in as efficient a manner as possible. So I'd like all audience members to sort of mute their mics and their videos and their phones in their locations. I would also request the speakers to sort of switch off the video unless they are speaking, so that we conserve bandwidth and ensure that we can do this properly. For everyone in the audience, we have Kavita from the Center for Public Policy who's monitoring the chat window. You're more than welcome to raise questions, and these questions will be sort of seen by me as they arise, and I will raise them as many of them as I can given the time window that we have. I think that's it from me. Manish, over to you.
Stop sharing.
So before that,
yes, just 1 second, Manish. We just get you and get on speaker view. No, they're not a go on.
I think Manish wants to say something else.
Yeah, no, but let's get a speaker view so that we only have speaker view.
Mr. Silku has joined.
Oh, good.
We have the UP perspective also available.
Oh, great. Welcome, Mr. Kunal Silku. I am very relieved to see that you will be speaking as sort of mentioned. Mr. Kunal Silku is the mission director of the Uttar Pradesh Skill Development Mission, and he will sort of be bringing in the perspective of the informal migrant as they sort of come home in UP, and how UP is being trying to deal with this using its technology administrative structures as well. So I think that gives us a very nice set of speakers, both on the labor surplus states, Bihar and UP, as well as on the labor deficit state, which is Gujarat. Over to you, Manish.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, Arnav. And I think what we are trying to do here at Ministry of Skill Development and the Sankalp program is to primarily reach out to state level and district level institutions in order to.
No, you unmuted her.
Manish, you've got muted. Please unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Now you're fine.
Okay. Is it clear now?
Yeah.
Okay. So good morning again. Thanks for this opportunity to allow me to participate in this discussion, Professor Arnav and Professor Basu, and the august panel of speakers. Sankalp is a program which is aimed at promoting decentralization at states and district level, and giving a larger say to the states and district in skill planning, and also linking people to employment. So from that standpoint, this is a very topical issue for us, because migration in and out of districts and in and out of states, in any case, we want to understand better in order to be able to plan for skill development and employment linkages better. to go a little back in history, so migration actually has a long standing history in India, and the merchants, the slaves, and the artisans have been traveling within and outside India from times immemorial. But the voluntary migration of the nature that we know of workers started somewhere towards this late 19th century. And what it has led to today is that we have about 500 million strong internal migrant diaspora and about 25 million strong diaspora of international migrants. The recent movement of workers from the more industrialized and more developed parts of the country to what we call as supplier states of labor is something that is being watched with great concern. However, what one is not seeing enough in the media covered is the inter-district movement of migration enough. Intra-state or inter-district migration is equally, if not more important. And there are only a few stories that appear in the newspapers and media. The governments are acting in a manner and acting at a scale which is unprecedented, committing almost every single resource at their disposal to manage this situation. And that is very heartening to see. And what one needs to understand is what is going to be the response of the societies, the businesses, the civil society organizations to this migration challenge. A case in point is recently announced scheme of GKRA, which is Garib Kalyan Rozgar Abhiyan, covering about 116 districts to link people to local 25 schemes. It was announced on Saturday, and probably for the first time in the history of India, there has been a concerted effort to converge jobs of a certain nature locally, and there's this effort to link the migrants and also the permanent citizens of the districts and the villages to jobs of this kind. Now, this again is, it resonates very well with one of our initiatives that we started recently with the Ministry of Panchayat Raj and Rural Development, wherein we are trying to take services related to sanitation and drinking water to the rural citizenry. And we are trying to create pool of locally available resource skilled people to service those requirements. So, so this is actually a very welcome move by the Prime Minister, and it also will help us address this local connect of jobs and employment better. However, as I have said earlier, migration is a reality, and migration from a low developed economic region to a highly developed economic region is inevitable. It doesn't only happen in India, it happens all over the world. So that will continue to be a reality, and more or less when the dust settles down and the situation improves, people will certainly like to go back to jobs that they have left off. However, the nature of these jobs might have changed a little. That is something that has got to be kept in mind. And one thing that Ministry of Skill Development is seeking an answer to as to how these jobs would have changed and what skill augmentation, etc., would be required for skill development and entrepreneurship ministry, and also the state skill missions, and also the district infrastructure dealing with the skill planning and implementation to deal with, is something that we are seeking an answer to from this webinar. And I think we'll get more clarity on that when the states start speaking, and the migration experts start speaking. What I would like to conclude by saying is any crisis is too precious to be wasted. Now, this crisis has actually given us an opportunity to reset this whole uh, thinking around skill development and employment. What part of that should actually be linked to the local employment? What part of the skilling effort should actually be aimed at employment opportunities outside the districts and outside the state has got to be looked at very, very seriously. So in that sense, it gives us a good opportunity to rethink this whole skill and employment ecosystem. So reconnecting and rebounding is very important, but I would like to contribute another R to that, and that is rethinking and also redesigning this whole canvas and redesigning this whole, the way in which we think about skill and employment linkages. So R3. So I understand that the states are also making taking steps to make sure that when the people actually go out in search of employment again, they are ensured the social security benefits and some of the other benefits that we have not been thinking about that seriously. So thanks to COVID, this has brought back focus again to social security of the poor, and in that sense also it's something that is going to ensure that there is an equitable distribution of development and equitable distribution of growth. And I think all this will help us truly create the Ek Bharat, Shresth Bharat in the true sense of the term. So look forward to this conversation today, and we would certainly like to learn from what the experiences the states have been and what have been the experiences elsewhere in handling situations involving migration governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manish. I think that sort of gives us an early view into what the government's been doing so far. I'd like to invite Professor Amit Basole from Azim Premji University to speak to us about his research and also set the agenda in terms of what he has been seeing on this entire labor market migrant movement issue. Over to you, Amit.
Thank you, Arnab. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for having me. This is indeed a very welcome effort and a great panel you've put together. What I'd like to do in my 10 minutes is start with some of the broad findings from our own survey, link it to what other surveys have found, and then go on to conclude with some ways ahead. You know, what kinds of lessons do we learn from this crisis and going ahead. So I'm going to share my screen. First, yeah. Before I start, just by way of information, I'd like to share our website with your viewers, which has collected a lot of information on the impact, particularly of the lockdown, the economic impact. This is the Center for Sustainable Employment, Azim Premji University, what you mentioned. And this is the collective work of many people, too many to mention here. So I'm just their representative. And I urge people to visit this site, csc.azimpremjiuniversity.edu.in, where the results of our survey are put up in the form of a dashboard, as well as several pamphlets and so forth are available in different languages, and a compilation of other surveys, which I will briefly allude to in my presentation. We have prepared a Google spreadsheet that has about 30 odd surveys conducted by different organizations, academics, consultancy firms, NGOs, and so forth, kind of to bring a more comprehensive picture to what has been going on. So let me start with my presentation. I just have a few slides. So very broadly, again, I'm summarizing very quickly here a survey which has several facets to it, which are available in our publications. Our own survey was a purposive survey of about 5,000 people across 12 states. And I've put it right up there purposive because remember that all of the surveys that we have seen, with the exception of CMIE, which is a nationally representative panel, which Arnab showed some data from, all the other surveys are purposive. So one can't easily draw national conclusions from these numbers. What we need to do is put together a range of surveys that have been conducted by different people in different areas, different groups, and then build up a comprehensive picture. Nevertheless, with that caveat, I'd like to say that like many other surveys, we've found a massive loss of employment, more severe in urban areas than in rural. We've found that self-employed and casual workers in urban areas are the worst affected of the lot. Women, Muslims, migrants tend to be worse affected than others. Interestingly and disturbingly, it's not only the informal workers, but also regular wage workers who have been impacted. So around half of the regular wage workers in our sample had received no salary or had had a salary cut during the lockdown. And this is something that indicates that the effects, the demand effects and so forth, are going to be much more widespread also. They will include part of what we think of as the organized sector also. Now, these findings are broadly similar across multiple surveys. I have here a few surveys that I chose, but you can go to our website or to the respective organizations' websites and check out their detailed results. In every case, as expected, we are seeing very large loss of livelihoods and earnings across different states, across different employment types, occupations, industries, and so forth. Now, as far as the kind of particular focus of today's panel goes, migrants, of course, everybody knows what has happened here, so I will go over it quickly. The Standard Workers Action Network, some of whose volunteers are based out of Azim Premji University also, has been one of the large volunteer-run efforts here. They have interacted with tens of thousands of workers in need and assisted their safe passage home as much as they could. In brief, the sudden loss of employment, the lack of a social safety net, and the trauma of forced relocation have been experienced by a very large number of Indians. And this is what we have to really deal with going forward. Now, there is somewhat of a sense of a choice between a rock and a hard place, in the sense that, for example, in our own study, we find that 7 in 10 migrants want to return to the place of work after the lockdown, either immediately or after a few months. And many of you would have started seeing reports in the news that indeed people are coming back. And that is, of course, in some sense, a good thing for the recovery of labor markets and of the economy in the in these places where they are coming back to. But it also shows you the difficult position that workers are in, of having to choose between these two options, of having to stay back, face an uncertain future back at home, lack of employment and livelihoods, versus undertaking the risk of relocating to places where they have a very real fear of contracting either the disease or of losing their work again if a second lockdown is announced, and so forth. Now, I'll come then to the lessons that we learn here. And there are many, right? And many people will emphasize different aspects of it. So I've just chosen 3 obvious ones here. There is, first and foremost, we were unprepared, right, for this, because we did not have the necessary information. I'm specifically speaking of the migrant crisis now, that there is a necessity for a decentralized and participatory data generation process now, where we enable ourselves to meet any further future crisis in a much more prepared fashion, because we know who is where. Number 2, enhanced and portable social security, because many people were caught in places where they did not have access to a safety net. They had it somewhere else, but they were not located where they had it. And connected to that, a reduction in precarity, of just how precarious employment relations are and how on the edge many households are. One of the findings from our survey, which I didn't talk about, is about how much savings people had, or how they suddenly experienced decrease in food intake because they did not have enough money to survive over the period of where they expected to lose earnings. So that level of precarity is absolutely, urgently needs to be addressed. And the third lesson is what Manishji said, that it's a crisis which is really giving you a unique opportunity to focus on the regional imbalances that we've known have been there in India for a long time. But this really has thrown them up in stark relief and calls upon us to address them. So very briefly, I will go to these three one by one and some things. And this is not something that is again, I'm not the only person saying this. These are things that people have been saying, and I've spoken to colleagues in SWAN and so on who have been doing this work. That one of the things that we can do is, even though the migrant receiving towns mostly do not have data on who these people are, the migrant sending panchayats do. Right? Most panchayats will have records of where people have gone, and that kind of information is actually available to us. Even if it be highly decentralized and distributed, we can draw on that and build up those databases. A second suggestion that has again come out of the work of SWAN is that we need to build workers' rights groups and unions in the source districts and states, where workers can then connect back to in the case of crisis. They have a support network or a group, and the source is emphasized because there are already relationships there. There is a certain kind of a local economy there where they are known, the workers are known, they are not unknown people over there. So this type of a source-based support network can really stand in good stead when they have to suddenly, in short order, they find themselves having to do something like they have to do now. And lastly, the skill mapping exercises that are going on, there are some interesting lessons that are coming from here too, and I'll emphasize only one, which is that we are finding out that in fact, a much larger percentage of our workforce has skills than we are used to thinking of from our traditional labor market surveys. Our traditional labor market surveys do not do a good job of finding out what skills people possess. And that has actually affected policy in the sense that we are focused too heavily on thinking of the workforce as unskilled and in need of imparting skills rather than what I think is closer to the reality, which is building upon existing skills. That skills are widespread, but they are maybe not be current. They may need to be built upon through various ways, including on-the-job training and so forth. So skill mapping exercises are showing us that skills are widespread. Okay, on the second aspect, what I said about social safety nets, very brief lessons from where we are right now. PDS has been very effective. We found that in our survey too. So universalizing it and making it portable is a very welcome idea that is out there. Manrega has proved to be crucial as a safety net. Some data was shown at the beginning by Arnab. Expanding entitlements here in terms of number of days and raising the wage rate, certainly in emergency situations like this would be very welcome. There are many calls out there for expanding to 150, 200 days of work and so forth. And I think those are all things that can be considered. Urban equivalents of the employment guarantee scheme have been proposed. They have been implemented in some states. Kerala has had one from before. Odisha, Himachal and Jharkhand have recently introduced or are thinking of introducing such urban equivalents. A national program is needed because the states do not have the fiscal capacity to ensure that it is a guarantee, but the national government does, the union government does. So a national program is needed. And bringing social security to unorganized sector has never been more urgent. I mean, this is an agenda that has been there on the cards for a long time. We have legislation from around 10, 15 years ago. We have several models out there of how to organize unorganized sector workers so that they can benefit from the same sort of cushion that EPFO, ESIC, other kinds of things do for organized sector workers. So there's an urgent need to build on these models. Lastly, on employment and job creation, only skill mapping, of course, needless to say, is not going to be sufficient. It may be necessary at this stage to know what we are dealing with on the supply side of the labor market. But on the demand side of the labor market, we have to focus on fostering private and public employment generation. I think both of those options are crucial. We can't afford to ignore either. In the short run, survival of micro enterprises is key, particularly those who are not in the formal credit net, because a lot of the Atmanirbhar provisions of expanded liquidity to MSMEs, they reach where the existing enterprises are already in the formal net or are able to get into it fairly quickly so that they can avail of the liquidity that is coming their way. But that is not the case for the majority of tiny micro enterprises. Right? They are not in the formal credit system. So they are very vulnerable to these shocks. Many of them, newspaper reports are coming daily. They are now being forced to sell assets to survive, which will have supply side effects going forward. So we need to have a very clear survival strategy for these tiny enterprises, which are very large employers. In the medium run, addressing regional imbalances. Right? Meaning, what I mean by this is the migrant sending, migrant receiving divide that we have, the migrant sending states, this is a great opportunity to reimagine their economies, to revive their economies. And in the last point, a bold sort of a long run idea is to reimagine urbanization itself. How should urban India look like? And I think one of the lessons here for us has been that very large metros with very high density slums and other such low income pockets are very vulnerable to such crisis. So can we think of a more distributed urbanization pattern? Can we have many more than 100 smart cities, right? I'm talking about thousands because India is a large country. We have 600 more districts and several more taluk towns, which are all potentially vibrant urban centers if we make them to be so. So a distributed urbanization where people do not have to travel long distances. Yeah. Yes. So I'm about done. A distributed urbanization is, I think, really the need of being imagined right now. So with that, in fact, perfect timing, I will end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this is a lot of food for thought. I think it sets up the agenda on both the analytical aspects, the data aspects, as well as the social policy aspects that need to be sort of need to be thought of in any attempt to try and address a crisis of this magnitude. I think we would like to move on to Mr. Balamurgan's sort of perspectives that he's sort of been seeing on the ground, which would sort of speak specifically to Professor Basole's sort of comments on both how communities and micro enterprises are dealing with this particular crisis. So over to you, Mr. Balamurgan. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you so much for this opportunity. And excellent presentation from Professor Amit. I can't agree more with whatever you have said in the presentation. I'll take 2 minutes quickly about what we have done, Bihar government, when the lockdown started. I had the privilege of working in disaster management department also during lockdown. So from day one, when the lockdown started, what we started to do is that we started helpline numbers. Initial phases, most of the calls were related to ration and then stay facilities. So we coordinated with all the state governments, and then dry ration was distributed at that point. In we facilitated distribution of dry ration and also getting them cooked food, and then some other relief materials, and then also identifying relief centers. That's when Bihar government started a unique model in which migrants were allowed to download an app, and then they can, they were asked to send details, bank account details, and then that's it. More than 29 lakh registration happened. More than 20 lakh persons were paid 1,000 rupees. It's happened during lockdown in the month of April itself. It went up to more than 20 lakh people were paid. And then relief center was started. All those things happened, and again, it's related to migrants. That's the reason I'm telling all these things. Even Bihar government started relief center kitchens in 13 cities in 9 states through Bihar Foundation. More than 50,000 people were fed every day. These are all some of the efforts. And even during initial phase of when the lockdown was announced during March 24th, that time itself people started coming back. if you remember that time, even after lockdown, some of the trains were allowed to ply from Maharashtra. Thousands of people came, and during that time, we made them, we registered the details, and then initial phases, home quarantines were ensured. Later on, after 29th April, that's when the real movement of people started, when the special trains were allowed. In fact, before that also, people tried to come in whenever they got opportunity. They came by walk, they come, all these things happened, but we arranged quarantine camps for all those who people came back. When things started moving in a fast pace after 29th April, when the special trains were allowed, initially we started receiving 10 trains, 20 trains, 30 trains. It went up to 110 trains. What I'm trying to say is that we started receiving more than almost 2 lakh persons of Bihar who were staying outside per day. We arranged quarantine centers where people were made to stay for 14 days. And all the arrangements there also, we gave them dignity kit worth 1,000 rupees, because they were coming from different places. They may not be having initial clothes, toothbrush, paste, and all those things. It's 1,000 rupees worth package. It's called dignity kit. Around 15 lakh 30,000 people stayed in quarantine centers. Put together in Bihar, our estimate is more than 30 lakh people came back. When we started registering details of persons who came back, I will not use the word migrant. When we are living in India, where it's a they have the freedom to move anywhere. That's the reason I'm avoiding the use migrant. When they came back, we started registering the details. So far, we could able to register details of 18 lakh 38,000 persons, out of which we could able to collect the skill details of 14 lakh 87,000 people. It's all, from where they came back, how many years of experience they have, what is their education qualification. All these details have been collected. There will be some error because these details were collected when lockdown was there. Right now, when it was, people were coming in a huge number. And then subsequently what we did, we created a portal where these employees, we call them as employees, these people with skill set, potential employees, that is a supply side information. We created a portal that's called Shram Sadhan, developed by NIC, and also we got support from pro bono support from good friends, where we started collecting information from employer, particularly from government departments. So those details were collected, and then using the online application, which has been developed specially for this purpose, the job matching has been done. Once the job matching has been done, the employee's mobile number, the SMS has been sent, whether you are willing to join this particular job. Actually, the job matching has been done based on the location. Actually, we consider district as a unit. We, wherever the job vacancy matching the skill set, that kind of a matching has been done. Subsequently, we also engaged Gram Vani. They are supporting us in calling these employees and also employers to ask, okay, whether this is whether you are finding it interesting, or you interested in joining this job. Through this effort, people are joining jobs. Apart from this particular portal, districts were also told to make all the efforts to find suitable job which is existing at district level. This is regarding provision of job. I'll list out some of the other efforts. For example, Jivika. In Jivika, we are having 4 or 5 initiatives. The number one is, we are making all efforts to include those families who are having eligibility to become part of SHG but not yet part of SHG. So they are being mapped, and then we are including them in the SHG fold. And when we did the quick survey, almost 45% of the families who came back from other states are already part of SHG network, because most of the cases, the women folk stay back in Bihar. So they were part of SHG. So what we are trying to do is that providing liquidity. We have a special credit products like food security fund, health risk fund at SHG level. It's available at a village organization level, that we call that as community-based organizations. So that food security aspect is being taken care of. The second aspect is we are also providing them with loans which is required to start small enterprises. So far, more than 1,000 persons were given with, I should say families were given with loan. They started the small enterprises also, because when they came back, they are not having any gainful employment. The effort is to create many more enterprises from those migrant families. Our minimum target is at least 25,000 in next 2-3 months. That is Jivika target. And also we are trying to link other government projects, like, for example, we have a goatry project, we have poultry project, we have dairy project, and also many of them will be doing agriculture, provided they get some credit support. So these are all the efforts from Jivika we are trying to make, and also we are going to ensure that all those families who came back are going to be part of food security, covered under Food Security Act. Actually, that responsibility of identifying families who are eligible to be covered under National Food Security Act, but not covered yet, the survey responsibility has been given to Jivika. So we are also doing that. This is from Jivika. And at district level, actually, I forgot to tell, there's a committee formed at development commissioner level. All principal secretaries are part of that committee. The committee meets every week or once in 3 days also to chalk out plans and initiatives which are aimed at providing opportunities for those people who came back. Few initiatives, few cabinet decisions already happened. For example, 50 lakh rupees has been given to district magistrates to try and do innovative projects to help people who came back. For example, West Champaran, where these people who came back having a specific, when we did the skill mapping, we know that, for example, more than 70,000 were working as tailors, more than 35,000 were working as drivers, more than 50,000 were working as cooks, and many of them were doing construction work. Some of them are having a good experience in tiles laying, and then they can make very good pavers. So they are being engaged in those kind of activities. Some of them are carpenters. So in some schools, they are being told to produce benches, which is required for schools. For example, in Jivika, we were making masks. So far, we produced, Jivika, they just produced 2 crore masks. The tailors who came back, around 1,000 of them has been engaged. All these things are the efforts towards providing gainful employment to those people who came back. Our effort right now is to provide as much as opportunities within Bihar, so that ultimately it is their choice where they want to work. Some of them may like to, of course, will go back to their original workplace. For example, around 40,000 people are working in Tirupur. So obviously all cannot be get engagement in Bihar, but the government effort is to ensure all of them, if not all of them, maximum of them get opportunity. And one more specific program also started. We have a public sector undertaking within Bihar. All of them were told to create clusters, at least 2 clusters per district. Enough funding arrangement has been already made. Rural Works Department, Road Construction Department, electricity companies, PhD, Public Health and Engineering Department. There's a massive program of providing a pipe drinking water scheme in Bihar, which is happening at this point in time, wherein you need many plumbers and uh, uh, other related workers. So we have a skill mapping done, so they are being engaged. Same way, this Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana has also been mentioned by Mr. Manish, wherein we are trying to construct community sanitary complexes, and then Prime Minister Awas Yojana is happening in huge numbers. So we need masons. So those.
Mr. Balamurugan, I'd like to request if we could sort of wind up in 1 more minute, please. We are sort of over the time.
Yeah, okay. So these are all the efforts which are being made. See, whatever effort at this point in may look small because the crisis is unprecedented and it's unimaginable. More than 35 lakh people came, and we are making every effort which is possible to help them. I think apart from these efforts, as Professor Amit said, we need to have a long-term, short-term, medium-term, and long-term plan. And I think this crisis has given us an opportunity to, do things which will help in addressing this problem in a sustainable way. That's where I want to stop, and thank you so much for the opportunity again.
Thank you, Mr. Balamurugan. I think this is a very helpful sort of perspective. It gives us a sense of what the government has been thinking of and all the different ways in which the government of Bihar has been trying to respond to these issues. Some of these experiments, I think, are things that can be learned from in other states and also be a part of any national sort of discussion that goes forward. I'd like to invite Mr. Kunal Silku, who is the mission director at the Uttar Pradesh Skill Development Mission, to sort of take over and sort of give us a perspective on what's been going on in Uttar Pradesh. Over to you, Mr. Silku. You need to unmute, sir. It's still on mute. It is empty. It's this one. It's this one. Can you unmute? Okay. I think you're now unmuted.
Yeah.
Wonderful. We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. A very good morning to all of you. Am I audible?
Yes.
So thank you once again for giving me this wonderful opportunity. It was great listening to all our esteemed panelists before me. I would like to commend Bihar. Bihar has done a fantastic job, and it's really a point of. I'm really amazed at how different states, working differently, think so alike, because many of the other initiatives done by Bihar have also been done by Uttar Pradesh, and we have also done few things differently from Bihar. I have made a small presentation also. If I could be allowed a screen share, so I will take my presentation.
Mr. Silku, there's a green button at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm clicking that.
You can share your screen.
Just click on that and it will share your PPT.
Yeah. Is the PPT visible?
Yes, it is now visible. Migrant workers, employment and economy.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Just a minute. How do I remove this? Okay. So I'll begin with my presentation. So as has been also told by Bihar, Uttar Pradesh witnessed a very huge amount of in-migration. But then right from the beginning, when this lockdown was implemented, we were very agile, and we were up to the opportunity, because we were already expecting a good number of people to come back to Uttar Pradesh. So what we did, we had this, we started these shelter homes, because the quarantine centers and these centers were already made, the hospitals in which we were actually keeping our COVID positive patients, or those people who were quarantined for the time being. But together with that, we also started the concept of shelter homes. These shelter homes were basically for those people who were like, because initially the transportation was also not allowed, so people were walking on foot. So then UP government took a resolve that will not let anybody walk inside UP. So all our bordering districts and even other districts also, we started shelter homes in which any person who was coming back, either through the official channel of buses or by taking permissions, trains started late in UP, or those people who were coming on foot. So all of them were actually made to stay in shelter homes. They were screened there. Thermal screening was done. They were also given ration packets. They were asked that where do they need to go. If they told that they have to go in the same district, then buses were arranged. They were sent back in the same district. If they told that they have to go to other districts within UP, then UP Transports Department arranged buses for those people in the bordering districts, and we ensured that those people reach their respective districts, and from there they are taken to their respective homes. Along with this, because a lot of people coming to UP were also people who were actually going to Bihar or to West Bengal. So even we transported those people from border to border, like from Agra, Mathura border, or from Ghaziabad border. We actually transported these people to Gorakhpur, Balia, Chandauli, borders like these. So actually also facilitated workers returning to different states who were passing through UP. So all this thing was done in our shelter homes. While this was being done, we also enumerated the entire labor data, and it was a very comprehensive, 25-30 fields was there, and our officers were deputed in those shelter camps, and there a lot of data like name, father's name, their bank account details, their Aadhaar number, their other ID number, how many family members do they have, what is their education status, skill mapping. So all of these data was done at that stage only. Once this data was collected with us, then when the people reached their villages, the guideline was that they will be quarantined. So while they were quarantined, there were Nigrani committees made in each village. The Nigrani committees was headed by Pradhan, and they had other members like Asha, ANM, secretary. They were there. Their prime role was to ensure that those people stay in mandatory home quarantine of 21 days. And thereafter this data was re-verified. We had a app called Rahat Mitra, and that Rahat Mitra app, we fed this entire data which was filled from shelter homes, and then it was later re-verified by these Nigrani Samitis, and only when these Nigrani Samitis verified these data, we started using these data. So as I have shown that Relief Commissioner Office and Employment Directorate together, we confirmed the data by Rahat Mitra app, and then we also shared the data with employment, with our employment department. We made a nice app. We will come to it later. So if I just talk about the data which was collected, we collected data in around more than 100 skills. So these are the top skills which we were able to collect. Like if you see that, this painter and POP workers, they are like 72,000 people have been in there. Then these factory workers other than factory workers, they are basically construction laborers and these kind of people, they are 71,000. Then we have factory workers, which is 55,000. Then we have Badhai, carpenter, 55,000, tailors, 49,000, agricultural laborer, 45,000, driver, 33,000, Rasoiya, cook is 16,000, electrician is 14,000. So this way, these are the top 10 sectors which we have shown, which came out through our skill mapping exercise. We actually mapped a data of 33 lakh plus workers. Out of these, we found that 15 lakhs plus were skilled or semi-skilled, and around 18 lakhs were unskilled. This unskilled data also included mostly women folk who came back, and also the unskilled laborers. So right now we have a very nice database along present with us, and this database drills down to the village level. We have the district field, we have the block field, and we have the village field. So at each village level also we know that what is the skill set of the people which has come back. So after this, the effort which was done, we actually established a Rozgar Ayog. A Rozgar Commission was established, and Rozgar Commission was headed by Honorable CM Sir himself. And different departments, ministers were actually made its member, like Finance Minister, MSME Minister, Industries Ministers, so on and so forth. Around 6-7 ministers are actually a part of this Rozgar Ayog. And we have a post called Agriculture Production Commissioner. This post is basically second to Chief Secretary. Agriculture Production Commissioner APC sir looks after the entire developmental departments of state. So he was made the member secretary of this Ayog. And executive body was also made, because this was the steering committee, and we also made executive body. The executive body had APC and Industrial Development Commissioner as chairman, and our additional chief secretary labor is basically member secretary. So labor department was brought in a big way, and I being director employment, I'm looking after the implementation part of this Ayog. So there, this high-powered Ayog had got two very clear mandate. One is the employment of migrant workers. We have said that, okay, whatever migrant workers have come back, now this Ayog will provide employment to them, be it self-employment, be it wage employment. And for providing employment, we will undertake all possible efforts. So those efforts include coordinating with various industries, coordinating with government departments, skilling them, and so on and so forth. And we also said that this Ayog will also look forward for welfare of these migrant workers. So we will also devise plans for their welfare, not just their employment. So these are the initiatives which we took for wage employment. We made a Seva Mitra portal and Seva Mitra app. The Seva Mitra app is already uploaded on Google Play Store. So this is WA is here. This is not V. This is W. So if anybody wants to see look at this app, they can simply go to Google Play Store and they can download this app. In Seva Mitra app, we have ported this entire data of migrant workers in this data in this app. And this app is more like an urban clap thing, in which, you know, at a customer to customer level, you can actually choose your district, choose your location, then you can actually see through all the skill sets, skilled workers available. You can, you know, call a worker at your home, get the job done, and then pay him accordingly. So this app, we have made this app, and this app is awaiting launch. Honorable CM sir is trying that this app should be launched by Honorable Prime Minister sir himself. And we are under the process of doing that, but the app is functional. We have also made a Seva Mitra portal, and in this portal also, this portal is basically the back end as well as the front end of this app. App deals only with C2C, but in this portal, we are also connected this portal with the entire industries, private people, with government departments, and everybody has been given logins. So now what we are saying that if any department also wants to employ, like suppose if any road is being constructed and you need construction laborers, so they will take it from this portal, and they will also mark that, you know, this department has taken up these many construction laborers. So we can also give a real-time MIS that, okay, which department has employed actually which people and in which project. Similarly, we have also made given this portal to our all industry people. So industries can also actually mark those workers, and we can actually know that which workers have been taken up by which industry. So it's a very nice functioning portal which has been made, and it is up for use. We have also made registrations possible in this portal. There's not only for migrants, even our UP workers and UP people, if they want to register, they can go, they can register themselves. There's a flag whether you're a migrant or you are a UP person. That flag is there. You can just put that flag and register themselves. Even registrations have been made very simple. It is through app also, through portal also. We have used Jan Suvidha Kendra, the common service centers also we have used. You can also register yourselves from there. So registrations as well as using this portal has been made very easy. And we have also done MOUs with FICCI and IIA, NAREDCO, and they have actually committed these 11 lakh jobs, that we will be providing 11 lakhs jobs to these migrant workers. And we have shared database with them and asked them to tick those 11 lakh people so that we can actually know that, you know, they are honoring their MOUs. So this is the effort which we did in the wage employment thing. For next was self-employment. In self-employment, we made a CM Yuva Hub portal. CM Yuva Hub portal basically was a sort of umbrella concept in which because see, there are different departments. We have written that around 11 departments and there are 14 schemes. They include Government of India schemes, they include the state government schemes like, you know, PM Employment Guarantee Scheme, CM Employment Guarantee Scheme. There are schemes of DUDA, schemes of Kaushal Mission. So many schemes are there, which actually let people start their self-employment ventures, NRLM and so on and so forth. And then they are also linked with banks for loaning or other purposes. So a lot of similar work is being done, and plus we don't have information at one platform. So we made an umbrella platform, CM Yuva, and there the person just needs to come and say that, okay, I need self-employment and this is my credentials. or my experience. So then our district team sits with him, interacts with him, and then the district team actually facilitates him in choosing that he should go into which departments, which scheme. And then we also handhold them in actually getting that scheme through and getting him loan. And thereafter, we also handhold them for 1 year. So this has been already launched by our Honorable CM Sir in this year's budget, and it is now being used for these migrant workers also. We have also launched the Abha app, and very soon this will be also launched, in which we are doing a skill mapping, workers profiling. We have made very nice small videos in which, in local language, we can actually.
Mr. Silku, I just like to
local
give you a time check. I think
I'll just take 2 more minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So Abha app is doing all those things, and we are actually made the small videos, and through those videos also we are trying to let all workers know about various government schemes. We have also done skilling initiatives. Skill gap analysis already has been done. We are trying to identify courses for reskilling, upskilling. These are again being asked by the workers themselves, that if they need some skilling, reskilling, we are also assessing it. RPL is being done. It is a small 3 to 10 day training. And we have already started trainings in tailoring in coordination with NRLM department as pump house operator in Panchayati Raj. This is already underway, and so on and so forth. What we said that, we are also ensuring social security. So for social security, we are actually devising plans for these people's pension, their housing, their insurance, and we have got a BOCW board is there, Building Construction Workers Board. So this board also has got a lot of schemes. So we are also registering these, because now 90 days already elapsed, or they will be 90 days will be spent very soon. So as soon as the 90 days they spend in UP, they will be registered in this BOC board, and then they will be given a lot of schemes which are there in the BOC board. So all those things are also being taken care of. So as I tell, this is the last slide. So the philosophy of Uttar Pradesh has been that this in-migration is an opportunity. We don't treat that, okay, our state is a poor state and we cannot provide jobs, because see, it is possible that we might not have that much industrialization, but then we have got a very good agrarian base. So we just need to fit the people in the right kind of job. So we have taken to the challenge, and this in-migration is an opportunity for us. The state is committed to the welfare of its bottom of pyramid, right from the to providing employment, to skilling, to their welfare. All the things are being done by the UP state, and we are not opposed to out migration, as it was brought out by some media channels that, if somebody wants to go out, he has to take permission or something. We are not at all doing all these things. It was all taken in the wrong spirit. We are very happy to provide out migration to different states. The only thing is, out migration has to be aspirational. We don't want that anybody should be out migrating out of UP because his basic needs are not met. If he's getting a better job opportunity, a higher skill, definitely we will be facilitating those people. So these are all the efforts which we have done in UP so far, and I thank you once again for giving me this opportunity, and it was nice interacting with all of you. If anybody will have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer those questions. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Mr. Silku. We actually have a lot of questions. We will come back to them, but I don't think, given the fact that we have close to 450 people online, and many of them have questions, I don't think we'll be able to discuss many of them. But IB will commit to putting together a document with these questions and circulating that, and putting together that as a consultation that we will put up on the YouTube link where this is being live streamed. Thank you very much, Mr. Silku, for sort of sharing with us both the IT and sort of the real sort of engagement with migrant and sort of returnee workers who are now without jobs. I think this is also very useful to have a sense. I'd like to move over quickly to Mr. Supreet Singh Gulati, who's the Mission Director of the Gujarat Skill Development Mission. I think it would be wonderful to hear the other perspective and the other side of skill development challenges, as well as the migration challenges from the perspective of a labor deficit state. Over to you, Mr. Gulati.
Thanks, Arnab. I'll divide my talk into two parts. The one will be on the what happened on the migration front, and the second what we are planning on the skilling side. first, we all know that Gujarat is an industrialized state with a lot of people coming in from outside the state to seek employment opportunities here. The lockdown, which happened on 22nd of March, it was necessary seeing the COVID point of view, no doubts about it. But it has been a crisis, especially for the migrant laborers. We have seen that. If I take census data, almost if we take by place of birth, number of migrants in Gujarat, interstate migrants by place of birth, in the sense that those who have had birth outside Gujarat and have come into Gujarat, in 2001, I don't have 2011 data, is 26 lakh. This understates migrant population to the extent that you do have people who are born into families who have migrated. So you have second generation, third generation people here who have also out-migrated during this period, during this lockdown period. But still, it gives a good information that if you have a 26 lakh people by birth who were born outside Gujarat and are working here, this figure would have reached probably 30 or 35 lakhs by 2020. We are looking at almost 10 to 11 lakh people by birth who migrate into Gujarat per decade, or around 1.5 lakh every year. That's the extent of migration we are talking about. On the other hand, if I look after the data of just the Shramik trains which have left from Gujarat, we have more than 1,000 trains which have left, each carrying 1,600 passengers minimum. So it's been just by the Shramik trains, we have had 16 lakh people leaving Gujarat. Another 4 lakh maybe by buses also. And then we have seen the crisis of people walking in foot, whether they started in Bombay, whether they started from Surat, and just walking across to reach their home states. So estimate is around 20 to 25 lakh people have left Gujarat. Some of them would have been alone, some of them would have been with families. So, just off back of the envelope calculations will tell you that this past 2 months has seen a reversal of migration of almost a decade. Majority of it has been through Shramik Special Expresses, which were allowed after lockdown 2.0. And another 40 to 50% of it has been either through buses or through whatever means the people could find. Interesting fact is that almost half of the migrants in Gujarat live in just one particular district, that's Surat. During this entire phase, I was working either in Surat or in Ahmedabad during the period of crisis. So in Surat, we have seen a crisis to the extent that the cooked food which was being made available, the government had to provide cooked food daily to around 10 lakh people. Obviously, the NGOs were chipping in, the industries were chipping in with dry rations, even the government had a PDS scheme to chip in. But it was a mammoth exercise to have 10 lakh meals being cooked every day and being supplied to 5 lakh people twice a day. And with the people standing in queues for almost a kilometer just to have their daily meal. That's the kind of crisis Surat has seen. You would have also heard about the law and order situations that broke out in between, not only in Surat, but also in Bangalore, in Bombay, in Chennai, which have a large migrant population. It's understandable because once the economic activity stopped due to lockdown, obviously people want the social security net, they want the social security of their family, and that's where the people wanted to be. Gujarat was among the first states to start the Shramik Express, and the migration was completed within a period of 3 weeks. Almost 1,000 trains left from Gujarat within a period of 3 weeks, and the chapter was closed as far as the Shramik Express was concerned. Similarly, Ahmedabad, another city with a large amount of migrant population. The first thing which came to my notice during this period is when we talk of migrant labor, we normally think of people working on the shop floors. People like masons was pointed out in the construction sector, people who are working in the factories was pointed out. What we also realize is there is a large self-employed sector which has also been taken care of the migrants. That may include ironing of clothes, that includes your tailors, that includes pani puri wala selling the pani puri on the streets, that includes your sabzi walas who here were predominantly turned out to be from Rajasthan. So it was an eye-opening exercise for us that the kind of activities that were being done by the migrant population in Gujarat and how the economy depended upon it. If we just take the factories, where you get a wage employment, I think that accounted just for around 25 to 30% of the overall people who migrated. The remaining were all mostly into self-employment and taking out and also into the construction side as well. Gujarat is right now facing a twin, two problems which are, one is a boon and the other is the problem. One is obviously the corona crisis. How do you restart your industry? One, it is not only an issue of supply of skilled manpower. The bigger issue, in my opinion, is the lack of demand at present. The lockdown has created a lack of a complete collapse of demand as well across the country and across the world. For example, for whom do you produce cars when the cars are not running on the road? Just an example. So if the products are not being consumed, most of us have put off our own personal consumption by at least a few months till the time corona crisis is over. So whom do you produce for? So restarting is not only a supply issue. Please understand, for me, it's a bigger issue on the side of demand. How do you kickstart the demand part? So that's why you have some schemes which are coming through by Government of India focusing on the demand, but just a thought on the demand side for you. I'll come to the skilling side on how do we skill the manpower and what are the mechanisms in place. I don't want to talk about the employment app which have been talked in detail by Bihar and UP, and I don't want to also talk about the Atmanirbhar Yojana which has been launched across the states by Government of India, as well as every state has had an Atmanirbhar package which is to a large extent same across the country. I'll be talking more from a Gujarat perspective and from a skilling perspective. There are largely 3 or 4 kinds of skilling schemes that are possible. But an employer does not see an employee only from a skill point of view. There are other factors. The first part is the aspiration. Does the job profile match the aspiration of the person? Does the pay being offered, does the perks being offered, do they match? In some industries particularly, you have people preferring to take employees from particular region, and not only, when I say region, not only from other states, particular region from the state of Gujarat as well. For example, the entire textile industry, the local population which is involved in it is largely from the tribal west belt of East Gujarat. That is because to do with a certain characteristic of the people, which the industry probably finds relevant in their job profile. The third is you also have to take into account that probably the people who we see are employed are not necessarily being employed by that factory. They are actually people from the labor contractors or for the man service providers of that particular employer. So just wanted to highlight that apart from the skills, there are many other factors which an industry takes into account before it starts recruiting a particular employee. The reason to highlight it, I'm just coming into it for a moment. I said there are largely 3 or 4 type of skilling schemes that are possible. One is you establish your own world-class, good skilling institutes which respond to the needs of the industries, which is what the government has tried to do across the country with the ITI ecosystem. The second is, if we talk about world-class institutions, the countries which follow this model is typically, let us say, a UK type kind of a scale, a system where almost 85 to 90% of your workforce is coming skilled by institutions, with the industries directly taking it from those institutions. The second model is what Germany is all about, is the apprenticeship model, where it is the industries themselves select which person they want to do, which person they want to select and train. They train it in-house. Even the certification at the end of apprenticeship period, whether it is 2 years or 3 years period, it's a long duration of apprenticeship in Germany. Even the certification is by the industry or by the industrial chamber itself. And the fact that it is a certification by the industrial chamber has lots of relevance within the German industry. It's widely acceptable, and it qualifies a person to take jobs all across Germany. So, but that you need a particular standard to be set up in skilling for that as well. The third kind of schemes that we have are what are called the short-term skilling schemes. Reskilling, upskilling, RPLs, 3 to 6 months courses are the typical kind of short-term skilling schemes that we talk about. From our experience over past 5 to 6 years since the time Skill Mission has been functioning, and I think Bihar was one of the leading states also to adopt that model, was that in our country, it's a kind of the co-recruitment, co-training, and co-deployment kind of schemes which have been largely successful on the skilling front, which basically means that your training and employer are going hand in hand, starting from the recruitment phase. It's the industry, the kind of the recruits whom we want are the ones who are being trained. It's not that you first recruit, train, and then you try to deploy. No. So it's kind of, let's call it co-recruitment, co-training, and finally, after the completion of training, we're talking about co-deployment. Bihar was one of the initial states which followed RTD model. I think Andhra Pradesh was also into it, and Gujarat has also been following RTD model for quite a while. So as far as the other factors are concerned, it makes a lot of sense to have a co-recruitment kind of a strategy for a state like Gujarat, where you have lots of employers. The challenge before us is how do we reach the large amount of MSMEs where these people have to be deployed. It is very easy to reach a large industry like a Maruti or a Toyota or Atoll or Welspun. These industries which are large, you tell them, okay, we are giving you money for training, please train and recruit these people and go ahead. But yes, they account for only a very small number of employees in the entire ecosystem. How do we reach the large number of MSMEs where these employers are located? For that, MSMEs will not have the capacity to train. For that, you need to set up industrial clusters who can provide the training. Or you need to promote apprenticeship within these industrial clusters who can, who can give theoretical as well as the practical training on the job then. So for me, there are two schemes which become important for me in this entire scenario. The one is the apprenticeship initiative of Strive, as well as the Mukhyamantri Apprenticeship Yojana, which Gujarat has been starting for almost 2 years. We could kick off this year's apprenticeship program yesterday through a VC with the Honorable Chief Secretary of the state. So that's the one part. Also, the Strive initiative of MSDE, which looks to develop capacities of the industrial clusters, especially of MSMEs, for apprenticeship, is one of the schemes which we are looking forward to starting in next month. Second, as far as the short-term skilling is concerned, on the RTD kind of schemes, in another 2 to 3 weeks.
Mr. Gulati.
Yeah.
I think, can I ask you to wrap up in the next 1 minute?
Sure, done. On the RTD kind of schemes, we are launching what is called an Industrial Kaushal Vardhan Kendra scheme, where again we are approaching the industry clusters to start short-term reskilling, upskilling, and RPL schemes for their employees, where they can train, and we are including a flexibility of, let us say, between 1 to 15-day training, that apart from NSQF aligned courses, you can have design your own courses, give your own certification, which accounts for your local needs, which accounts for your local changing in processes, which a national framework may not be able to account for. We are looking forward to launch of that scheme, maybe another 2 to 3 weeks as well. So that's from an employee state perspective. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Gulati. I think that gives us a sense of the complexities from the hiring perspective and the policy changes that may be needed to facilitate MSMEs in terms of their hiring norms. Thank you very much for that. I think both sides of the coin are equally important in trying to solve this problem. And I'm reaching out to Mr. Sanjay Awasthi to try and give us a sense of what are options ahead and what have been tried internationally in terms of looking at rehabilitating migrant workers. Over to you, Mr. Awasthi.
Okay, thank you. It was really heartening to hear these great presentations, especially from the states. That was really encouraging to see. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see your presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about the governance of migration. As IOM is a global organization, we pool in learnings and experiences from around the world wherever it is required. And IOM, as the name suggests, deals with all aspects of migration, whether international or local. And just briefly giving a quick background, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recognizes that migration is a powerful driver of sustainable development for migrants and their communities. And IOM therefore applies a whole of government and whole of society approach, which means that every aspect of the government and every aspect of the society is critically important to migration governance, striving to ensure that migrants and migrants and their needs are considered across all policy areas, laws, and regulations. And to achieve this, IOM draws upon its 70 years of experience supporting governments with mainstreaming migration into local and national policy planning. While policy planning or policy making on migration governance tends to take place at the national level, a national only policy approach fails to consider that the development impact of migration is most profoundly felt at the local level. And that's where India plays a very unique role, primarily because of the federal structure, which allows for local and need-based customization of policies, and which we have seen just now through the presentations of Mr. Silku and Mr. Balamurugan and Mr. Supreet, that how diversely they have dealt with similar challenges. Now, recent research on interstate migration exhibits that the annual rate of growth has nearly doubled. So annual rate of growth has nearly doubled in comparison to the previous decade. And this acceleration has been accompanied by the surge of economy. Most interestingly, research showcases that female migration for work is particularly pronounced, as women are migrating at nearly twice the rate of men migrant workers between 91 and 2001. And then in the following decade, male economic migration has increased from the rate of 2.4% to 4.5%, while the female economic migration is increased from 0.4% to 7.5%. So in terms of what kind of tools we use, what kind of strategies we deploy to support the governments across the world, I'm just giving one or two brief examples. The first one is migrant tracking metrics. It tracks and monitors the displacement and population mobility. And in this case, as Mr. Silku and Mr. Supreet had also mentioned, that we don't necessarily call them migrants, but just because they are moving from one place to another because of jobs, that's how the word migrant or migration is used. It is designed to regularly and systematically capture, process, and disseminate information to provide a better understanding of the movements and evolving needs of displaced populations, whether on site or en route. So whether in the source of origin or in the destination places or en route. And this is done by mobility tracking, flow monitoring, registration, and surveys. And it has been used in 80 countries since 2004, and 40 million individuals were tracked globally in 2018 alone. And the platform is used to build administrative capacity to improve preparedness to natural disasters, produce target prevention and response strategies. So it could be deployed for a wide-ranging set of purposes. And then just to give an example is interactive IOM database of flow monitoring Europe and migration data portal. And you can see a quick visual of how it looks like on a map. So it records routes, figures, data sets, and data stories, and information on migrants for accurate evidence-based policy making. Data is segregated by age, sex, region, and of course it can be customized. And in this context, there's another initiative that IOM has taken. We have developed a MIG app, which is an abbreviation of migration app. It's a smartphone application for migrants to have accurate and comprehensive migration related information at their fingertips. And governments have a platform to directly inform migrants. It can also be customized to local context in terms of the supply and the demand, as well as adding more information. And then IOM's experience with migrant support, I'll just give two quick examples. The first one, of course, is this one. This is poverty reduction through safe migration, skills development and enhanced job placement in Cambodia, Laos, PDR, and Myanmar and Thailand. It cuts across several countries. And migrant workers, especially women, to utilize decent employment and safe migration schemes through enhanced collaboration between potential employers, relevant sector associations, and skills development partners, greater access to skills development in target sectors through affirmative action, leading to improved employability through strengthened policy framework, enhanced assistance services, and safe migration information at all stages of migration cycle. And in Bangladesh, we have been implementing a sustainable reintegration and improved migration governance. It was mainly targeted at the migrants returning from the Gulf countries. And it involved customized reintegration and referral services, immediate assessment of needs, mapping at district level, monitoring for progress, psychosocial support, community sensitization for social integration, and financial literacy, and assisting the government in policy formulation. And then, of course, how to support how to ensure welfare of migrants. So IOM's multi-level reintegration program supports tailored and sustainable reintegration for migrants. It's purely based on the need requirements. Reintegration and skill development must be dovetailed with sustainable psychosocial support, and we repeatedly place emphasis on this important aspect, especially if you look at the recent experiences of our own migrant workers traveling from one state to another and having to undergo very difficult circumstances. They and their families very often require a certain kind of psychosocial support. And then, of course, reintegration for migrant returnees, their families and their community. And this holistic approach provides need-based support to migrants, sensitizes communities to migrant issues, and encourages more responsive policy initiatives. And such programs provide a package of supportive services to returning migrants and encourage their re-engagement with new employment opportunities. And in this case, I especially like to mention the significant number of women migrant workers. And going through the media stories and coverage, I'm sure all of you would have noticed that there was very limited focus on the needs and problems of women migrants, which certainly has to be taken into account just by sheer numbers. I had mentioned the scale of women migrant workers across the country. And that should apply at every level, not only in transit, but also in the migrant sending states as well as the migrant hosting states. And then coming to, as the domestic remittances market exceeds almost 2 lakh crore rupees, all interventions must attempt to enhance the financial inclusion of migrant workers. They're a very important component of the society. They are normally not seen, not heard, but because they mainly participate in the unorganized sector, but they constitute a very important part of the society. And while we are collectively looking at ways and means to reboot and restart the economy, it will be very difficult to do so in the absence of these migrant workers. An increase in female migration necessitates gender-focused intervention that assesses and supports the needs of migrant workers. And in this context, I would like to mention the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, Manrega, and urban employment like Jharkhand and Odisha, which some of our colleagues, especially Amit, did mention very, very focusedly, becomes very important. And then, of course, we should not forget the role of international migrants, the Indian migrants who are returning from abroad, because Kerala state alone is projecting the return of almost 200,000 migrants between now and September. And as per the data available in the news reports, almost 200,000 migrants are waiting or in the process of coming back from the Gulf region itself. And they are going to also offer a lot of skills, knowledge, experience, which could be meaningfully deployed, especially if many of them are not able to go back to where they came from. And in this case, some of our experiences has been to do with pre-departure orientation before the migrants go. It could apply in the local settings also. Information on safe migration, what safe migration constitutes, how it can be ensured, enforcement and grievance redressal, because all these migrants do have challenges, finding a mechanism to meaningfully address them. And then Pradhan Mantri Bima Yojana welfare fund can be adapted to internal migrants also.
Mr. Awasthi, I'd like to request you to wrap up in the next 1 minute, please.
Oh, it's done, Orna.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think this is a very useful sort of perspective. Before I sort of
Before we take a couple of questions, I guess.
before we take a couple of questions, I'd just like to
Get Manish
invite
back
Manish. I think Manish had a reaction to give, and I think once we hear from Manish, we'll sort of take a couple of questions that we have received on the chat. Over to you, Manish.
Thank you again, and very enlightening presentations from both Sanjay and Amit. This research was fantastic, and Sanjay, you presented a very good perspective on how migrations are actually handled across the world and what all some of the basics that we need to keep in mind while handling an issue which is as sensitive as migrant governance. Thank you very much. However, what I was listening to with rapt attention was the presentation from the states, and UP, it went into details on how they are doing it and the kind of work that they have done. Similarly, Bihar, the kind of work they have done. But I see here a very good opportunity, and I tell you why. Because though both the states talked about aggregating jobs at the local level and then connecting the local talent with those jobs, and the GKRA is also talking about connecting people locally with the jobs. But all said and done, I feel there would be some people who would actually look for jobs across the states. The kind of skill sets that they possess, they may not actually be utilized in those states well. See, this conversations that we have been having with these states right from the very beginning the Sankalp program started was about migration as far as it is desperate migration, when people go and work for employments and wages at the subsistence level, that should be checked to the extent possible. And I think with this aggregation and the GKRA management, etc., being done well, I think we can check the desperate migration to a very large extent. However, what Mr. Gulati was also talking about is there is a challenge of how to start the economy, and he is also looking for ways to connect with the supplier states in a manner so that the economy can be restarted. I actually see an opportunity of sort of converging the efforts of UP, Bihar, and also Gujarat on one side. Will it be in form of a platform? Will it be in form of some other form of data and other exchanges? Is something that needs to be seen. But also, this kind of an exchange would not, sort of outlive its utility in next 4 months. This can actually be more of a permanent structure that can help us, induce the aspirational migration, to borrow the word of Mr. Silku that he used in his presentation, aspirational migration to a very large extent, because that is something we should promote. And at the same time, the local efforts that are being done, that I'm sure is going to check the desperate migrations that have been happening from the state. So I would quickly like the reactions from the states if possible, or we can take it offline as the...
Manish, I would like to request that we take this offline. I think thankfully we can reach out to individual speakers in our own capacities and hear from them. I think on a collaborative basis, I think we understand that, everyone is looking at the same problem, but has different facets facing them. And I think in a framework like this, I think it gives us a sense of what's happening in a wholesome fashion. I would like to put across a couple of questions from the audience, because the audience will go missing in the future. And I think that's also an important part of, looking at the problem that's going on. So I think I'd like to sort of start with a question which, let me pose the question. This is from Dr. Mohammad Fayaz from Aligarh's Women's College, who's asking a question which I think is very deep, and I didn't think I heard very much about it, is what measures may be taken by entrepreneurs to sort of regain confidence of migrant workers post-COVID? I think confidence building measures are sort of lacking. Maybe, I think Amit or perhaps Sanjay, if you could sort of look at what may matter very significantly, I think it would be useful to hear from you.
So I'll let Amit go first and then I'll be happy to come in.
Sure. So, I mean, it's an excellent question. And I think, this is sort of part of what I was talking about in terms of the rethink of precarity that this situation behooves us to do. The private sector and entrepreneurs and private sector in general has a big role to play. They have played a very large role already, organized as well as in individual capacity. However, we have also seen enough kind of disturbing instances of people abdicating their responsibility towards workers also. So I think there's a need to have a national dialogue on this, that there is a responsibility that employers have. When such crises happen, they should not abandon their workers. The government, of course, has a responsibility to supervise and to regulate and so forth. So in this respect, the rolling back of labor reforms, for example, was exactly the wrong thing to do, which we didn't come up today. But that's not what we wanted to see at a time when workers were already so traumatized by their precarity. Entrepreneurs, in fact, should step up and say that we are not really, in favor of these kinds of rolling back of labor regulations at a time like this, and that demand which Surpreet mentioned and other kinds of things are much more determining of the health of the economy at this point than reducing already weak regulations.
Thank you. Sanjay?
Yeah, in addition to what Professor Amit has mentioned, I would like to highlight 2-3 points. One is a mechanism to reconnect with these migrants, because as I said in my presentation, many of them have undergone very difficult experiences while transiting from one point to another. And the first priority, which many of the states, as was demonstrated through the presentation, is already being done, it needs to be done more intensively. And that's where my great emphasis on psychosocial support becomes very important, not only now, but in the coming months. And secondly, in terms of the demand, regeneration of demand, the challenge is that majority of these workers were organized in the unorganized sector. And that's where their former employers or their employment opportunities have become very difficult. And in course of our conversations with relatively large, more established companies and corporates, they seem to be more comfortable. They have been fulfilling their duties little better than others. But the bigger challenge is that many of these companies are now struggling to find workers. I was talking to a large conglomerate which deals in construction, where the maximum component of employment is going to be generated. And they were saying that the workers were provided with housing, everything, and then they were there, they were staying put. But now, since the mobility has is being facilitated, they want to go back, and it's very difficult for them to figure out why.
Yeah,
we are also talking to garment sector companies, some leading brands. They were saying that we are desperate to restart the production, but our workers are not available. We want them back. And the workers who have gone back, many of them are not willing to return so soon. So they need to be reassured, and with better initiatives which could actually help them come back. Thank you.
Thank you. So there have been a number of questions, I think, which have been lauding the Bihar and UP sort of attempts at using apps and using online technologies to try and get a sense of the diversity and the extent of skill matching that's possible and the number of people who are looking for jobs. But there is a digital dividend, and so I think one of the questions that I would like to hear answers to from UP and Bihar, I believe Mr. Gulati has had to move on to another meeting. So I'd like to really hear from UP and Bihar on how are you proposing to reach out to people who are on the wrong side of the digital dividend? Mr. Balamurugan, Mr. Silku, are you there?
Yeah, I'll take a minute to answer, and then in fact, I'm also having another meeting. I waited
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I understand.
After spending 2 minutes, I'll be taking off.
Sure.
Yeah, in fact, many of them would not be having a smart mobile. That's the reason I mentioned about that particular initiative involving Gramvani, where there's no need for smart mobile. It's a call center kind of a facility where you have all the details getting recorded. The SMS can be sent. The automatic calling system calls up the mobile number, and then it's not only automated. If required, we call them back. We call them through
Sure.
call center agencies also. We have that system in place. Yeah. And apart from that, I'll take 30 seconds more. We have a ground for, in the sense, in Jivika, we have job resource person and block level. We are giving the details of these employees and then employers, asking them to call and then connect. That is also being done. And then the 27th of this month, I'll give that example and then close. Road construction department taken out an advertisement in the newspaper stating that these are all the skill set, and you have those who got registered themselves can come to executive engineer road construction department office. The details have been mentioned for counseling, so that you will be counseled to get job, and then provided information regarding vacancies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Balamurugan.
Mr.
Mr. Silku, if you could sort of give us a sense of the, I think it would be heartening to hear both about the Seva Mitra as well as those who cannot get on to Seva Mitra. UP's approach to that. Your mic is still muted. It's still muted. Oh, you can't hear us.
Yeah. So now I'm unmuted. Actually, the host is not allowing me to unmute every time.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize.
That is the issue. Yeah, I will answer that. Actually, see, while we were developing these tech platforms, this was the first question which we handled. Okay. We expected that none of these people will be having smartphones. So if I will take 2 minutes to actually answer this, because this is important also. See, we have developed the Seva Mitra platform. So Seva Mitra platform, there are two parts. One part is the registration process. The registration process basically deals with these people, these migrant workers, or the, like our UP born workers. So we have given various modes of registration. So one mode of registration is physically approaching the common service center, which is established in each village. There are few larger villages which have even got 2 or 3 common service centers. So if you want to enroll yourself as a worker, you can physically approach that common service center and you can fill up a form and you can register yourself. Alternately, you can also come to the employment office, which is in the headquarters, and you can register yourself. So these two approaches are present for enrolling yourself, which are not based on technology. The other alternative is obviously registering on portal and app. So that is also available. But these two approaches specifically deals with people who can't come, you don't have a smartphone. Now we come to the demand side. The person, if you are actually employing these people, so how will you employ these people? So for employing these people, there are 2-3 ways which we have given. One thing is we have given the details of these people in the app. So through the app, you can actually call these people. So the worker need not have to have a smartphone. He just need to have a phone. Even if you have a normal button phone, the sender, if he is having a smartphone, he can see your location according to the place where you have been registered, and he can call you. Alternately, if the caller also does not have a smartphone, then we have given option of a helpline. That helpline needs to be started. You can actually call the helpline, and the helpline will connect you with the concerning person. in this entire schema, we are also trying to get in players like Urban Clap, get in players like, like these body shopping companies in between who can actually build brands. So right now we have connected C2C directly, but as a future progression, we are actually trying to bring in private players in between. So you will be calling to these private help desks, and these help desks or private players, which in turn connect you with the requisite manpower. But even today, the calling feature is available. So as you see, both from the employee side and the side, we have got this thing done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silku. That's very helpful. I think that's all the time that
we are actually way above time.
We are above time. We are about 20 minutes over time. I would like to quickly call on Professor Basu to sort of conclude the session. I think it's been wonderful.
Yes, absolutely, Arnab. And I think, first of all, thanks to all the speakers. I know a couple of them had to leave because we really overshot time, but I think the discussion has been fantastic. I think I'll start off. It's very difficult to put all of this together in like a minute or two. But the first thing I'll kind of say is that what this has shown us, and then what we've learned is that there have been not just national but local solutions which have also been successfully attempted and are being attempted to handle the crisis. Some of it is not necessarily always known outside, and I think that's an area where I think everybody should work together to make sure that this is publicized, be it UP, be it Gujarat, be it Bihar. So it doesn't matter whether it's a labor surplus or a labor consuming state. I think every state has worked towards addressing this crisis, and given the suddenness of the crisis and the scale of the crisis, and I think that's something which is highly laudable in this entire environment. A couple of other points I think which in my opinion are major takeaways that we should kind of reflect on is the fact that yes, and this has been mentioned by Manish, by Amit Basole, by all the state representatives, including Mr. Awasthi from IOM, is the fact that the standard idea of skilling that we've had, probably this has also shown up that we need to kind of rethink and relook at it, because primarily as a survey that APU had run showed that the inherent skill level in people are probably higher than what was expected. What is probably needed is a reskilling to meet the job requirements, to meet the requirements of the industry, which is what has been talked about by both in Bihar, in UP, in Gujarat. That how do we get the right fit? How do we match the job? How do we match the jobs? It's not that job. I mean, it's not that many jobs, but it's not that there are no jobs. But how do you kind of get the right people to the right kind of thing? And I think that's one of the most important things. One very important takeaway, which I think has been a thing which is kind of run through across everybody's statements and opinion, is that the need to kind of create a social security network primarily for the unorganized sector, where a large number of these people, large number of these migrant workers kind of belong to, and that will kind of be will have to be one of the prime drivers going forward. I think the idea that Professor Basole also mentioned about creating a large number, or what he called as, the large number of smart cities, or more importantly, what he termed as distributed urbanization, could be potentially a solution going forward to also address the whole idea of an aspirational migration and not just a desperate migration. So I think the whole idea that this should take us towards having an aspirational migration will kind of also be addressed in that context. And I think it's very appropriate that what Mr. Silku from UP has mentioned, which I think appropriate works across the board, is that it's not about stopping migration, it's not about preventing out migration, but ensuring that this should kind of look at the aspirational part of it. And importantly, the unorganized sector should not be left out of it. One or two other things I think is important, and even the last question that Arnab asked, which was based from the comments that we got on the chat, is important, and this is again what something Mr. Awasthi had mentioned. All of these projects, all of these approaches are fantastic. As we take it forward to I won't even say logical conclusion, but to the next stage, But I think one of the key drivers in all of this would be the ability to reconnect with all these people who've moved on. For a variety of reasons, some maybe because of peer pressure, some maybe because of other factors, some more genuine factors, we don't know. But the need to reconnect, get them back in the loop, in the circuit. I'm not saying get them back to their respective jobs. Say some may get back, some may not, some may move on to other things. That's fine. But I think to be able to reconnect everybody, something which UP is, Mr. Silku explained as to what they're doing, I think that is something which will be one of the challenges towards ensuring that the whole approach of reconnect and redesign becomes successful. And in a sense, I think that is what will lead to a convergence of both the labor surplus and the labor consuming states, so that this reconnection will ensure people with better choices and potentially serve the aspirational migration argument a lot more better. I think there are obviously a lot more specifics that each of the speakers have mentioned. I think what we will do, and as Arnav said, that based on all the chats and all that, we have made notes on that. We will put this together in that document, which we'll also attach to the YouTube link that is going to be shared. That's going to be up there and will be shared with everybody in a public platform.
So I think I'd just like to end by sort of noting that we actually got a lot of inputs, far more than I think what we had anticipated. We will be reaching out to each of the speakers for their presentations, and we will be archiving this on the YouTube handle that we have. For those of you who have registered, we will be updating this information to you on your email IDs. Between the conversations that we have had, my big takeaway as sort of the host here is that we certainly need stronger governance and sort of interstate sort of mechanisms to be able to address these kinds of issues. And there are many models out there, and I think we can learn from them, but we also need to contextualize them to our Indian realities. So I think that's a way forward, and I would be very much keen to be in touch with all the speakers to try and see whether we can contribute to that as we go forward. I'm happy to end by noting that we hit a maximum of about 450 people who are listening to us, and I think that's been ticking up and down. So I think that's kind of the raw measure. I think we got also a lot more people online than we thought we would have. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much to all the speakers for finding time in their sort of very, very busy schedules to address what I think is an issue of national importance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let him do it because
Thank you.
there's something to say. Thank you.
Happy.